This balancing force is engineerable. That means it's possible to do a type of vibrational engineering with these energies. This is the exact same vibratory energy as what you see around the heads or the bodies of the saints in every tradition. It's not a metaphor, it's an actual vibrational force. There are ways this can be engineered and activated, and they use this all the time in the ancient world. They could use it from anything from powerful spiritual activations to profound healing to projecting extremely toxic and deadly vibrations. That unless you're trained in an energetic science like Chinese medicine, a Western medical doctor will never even know what happened to the person because they won't see the blockages that it creates. They won't see the effects on the energy flows. So when I began to work with vibrational teachings and methods of different traditions all over the world, which I was able to focus on during the 12 years that I spent at the university getting my doctorate in international studies, there's always a challenge because different traditions will look at the vibrational realities around us, the vibrations that affect human consciousness, that affect our thoughts, our feelings, as well as our energy system every moment of every day. They'll analyze these through different methods. There's a concept that I refer to as the number prism, that to understand any phenomena, what we do in a modern scientific approach is we divide it into its component parts. And so what you'll find in India, for example, to understand healing vibrations, they tend to divide them into 3 different parts. And they'll talk about the 3 gunas. They'll talk about vata and pitta and kapha. They use a 3-fold division. In the West, there'd often be a 4-fold division of the 4 elements. In China, a 5-fold division of the 5 elements. To fully understand any system in the world and to be able to differentiate out every one of its core aspects requires, at minimum, a 12-fold division. This is a classical teaching from great spiritual and healing traditions in the world. That's why there are 12 disciples around the Christ, why there are 12 imams in Shia Islam, while there are a division of the stars into 12 signs of the zodiac around the sun. It's 12 around the one. For those of you that know sacred geometry, and you look at how a cube is structured, a cube is the form that gives rise to matter. The cube has 12 lines that define the cube. If you look at a sphere, you can fit exactly 12 spheres around a central sphere. Again, 12 around the one. So, to lead to the discussion directly of this, I want to give a frame of reference of what we have done to create modern technology. Because sometimes we take for granted that we live in an age of technological miracles. We just are so exposed to it every day, we don't think about it anymore. But the world has been completely transformed in the last 100 years through discoveries that have taken place over the last 150 years. Now, what I'm referring to here is that to have a science, you need to be able to differentiate any aspect of things into its component parts. You need to have a spectrum, what we would call spectrum analysis. So one of the first breakthroughs that we had was the identification of every type of matter that exists in the physical world. In the ancient world, you never had that. So we live in a material world, but we didn't know what all the different pieces of matter were until the latter part of the 1800s with the identification of the periodic table of elements. What we call the periodic table of elements is really the identification of the complete spectrum of matter itself. That opened up everything in material science for all of our modern technology. But then there was another breakthrough that took place in the late 1800s and then was finalized in the year 1932. And that was identifying the complete spectrum of electromagnetic energy. Because until 1932, with the identification of microwaves, we didn't have an understanding of the complete spectrum of electromagnetic energies. So what you find in many classical traditions is that they will talk about different levels of creation. So there's the physical level, there's the etheric life energy level, that in China would be called qi, or in Japan would be called ki, or in India would be called prana. Greeks would call it the ether. So this etheric vital force energy is above that of the physical. Then there are consciousness levels, beginning with what we call in the West the astral level. Well, with all these different levels, we have to understand a progression that is taking place in modern science. People don't properly understand what electromagnetic energy is, Because time and time again, in subtle energy research in modern times, things dealing with etheric life force, with chi, we try to get validity from modern science by saying the vital life force is electromagnetic. Electromagnetic energy is not the vital life force. If it was, you could plug the base of your spine into an electrical outlet and get charged up. But it doesn't work that way. In fact, as we'll describe later tonight, there's a vibrational component in electromagnetic energy that is extremely toxic. And that's why people get electrosensitivity and have detrimental effects from electrical fields. What the vital life force is, that's above the level of the physical, in every classical tradition, they understood that this vital life force is what went into the physical and animated it. It's the animating power. So when we understand that, we'll understand that when that power has animated the physical body through what the Chinese call the universal chi field, or what the Greeks would call the ether, that animation process creates resistance passing through the conductor of the human body, passing through the conductor of physical materials, and that means that this faster than light energy slows way down. And this particular energy from the ether begins to decay. The decay of the etheric energy, of the vital force energy, is what we call electromagnetic energy. That's why Nikola Tesla, in his work, said, well, today in technology, we worked with retarded Hertzian waves that are slower than light. But Tesla, in the 1890s, said there's another type of wave, scalar waves, that are faster than light. And that's the real thing behind the electromagnetic energy. So for what I'm about to describe to you, the concept is then that our electromagnetic energy is in fact decayed life force. It's the decayed vital energy that animates living beings. But it became a shadow substance in electromagnetic energy. Now it becomes gross enough, it becomes dense enough that we can use it to do things like turn a physical motor and create our modern technology. Hard to do that with the ether. You can animate a living being. And it's said that some traditions have been able to harness the ether to be able to turn motors. And there's a lot of work going on in this field today in things like the Tesla Society. But that gross level of the energy and electromagnetic energy is what we use in modern technology. So the discovery of this vibrational spectrum of all the subtle energies that are too subtle to be picked up by electromagnetic equipment began to take place in the 1930s in France. One of the major researchers was a radio wave engineer named Louis Turin. And Louis Turin had studied French radiesthesia, the method of being able to pick up subtle vibrations through the use of particular types of pendulums or other tools. Now, the difficulty we have today is that their method has almost nothing to do with what you see today with the use of pendulums and mental dowsing. It's a completely different method. In this work, they don't ask any mental questions. They don't program the pendulum mentally ahead of time for movement. Rather, the pendulums have particular types of angles or shapes built into them that resonate with a particular vibrational force, or they can be tuned to a series of different vibrations. Then, through the movement of the pendulum or other type of measurement tool, you'll then be able to perceive simply the presence or the absence of an invisible vibration that most people cannot perceive. Some people who are very sensitive energy healers or psychics may be able to perceive some of these energies. But what the tool allows you to do is then to pick up that vibratory force coming from any person, place, or thing. So with the work of Louis Turin as a radio wave engineer, he understood that there are all types of waves that are passing through us all the time that you'll have no idea even exist unless you have a tool to be able to detect it. So he knew from radio wave technology, radio waves are passing through things all the time. You don't know they're there until you use a crystal and you tune the crystal to pick up the broadcast. So using the concepts of the French radiesthesia, which I won't go into too much of the background tonight, but let's just say it goes back to ancient times, goes back to the ancient Egyptian temple science, goes back to the work of the Jesuits in the Catholic tradition. And this is not some conspiracy theory. This is actually coming from writings of Jesuit-trained French priests who wrote in French in the early 1900s and who wrote books about this. Then came into France, was given out to the public as an actual method to detect subtle vibrations, and then was taken further by people like Louis Turin. This was a gigantic development in subtle energy work, to be able to